My name is Lila, and at 68 years old, I never expected to start over again. After losing Richard, my husband of 45 years, to cancer last month, I thought the worst pain was behind me. Then came the phone call from my son Gregory that shattered what little peace I had found. "Mom, I sold your car," he announced casually, like he was telling me about the weather. The vintage Mustang Richard had lovingly restored for me. The car with the secret compartment in the glove box that Richard had whispered about on his deathbed. I felt the room spin as panic set in. Before I continue this heartbreaking story, where are you watching from today? Hit like and subscribe so you never miss one of my stories. And let me know in the comments if you have ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted with your whole heart. Richard and I met at art college in Virginia back in 1978. I was studying fine arts painting, specifically dreaming of gallery exhibitions and creating beauty in the world. Richard was the practical one, pursuing mechanical engineering, but with an artistic eye that most of his classmates lacked. He could see the elegance in machinery, the poetry in physics. We were opposites in many ways, but our differences completed each other like two halves of a whole. Our wedding was a simple affair in my parents' garden in Virginia, with dogwood trees in full bloom. The scent of those white flowers still reminds me of that perfect spring day when we promised forever to each other. We had no idea what challenges lay ahead, but we faced each one together over 45 years of marriage. Richard built a respectable career as a mechanical engineer at a firm that designed custom parts for classic cars. He never became wealthy, but his integrity and attention to detail earned him promotions and the respect of his colleagues. I found my calling as a high school art teacher, guiding young minds to express themselves through color and form. The joy of watching a student discover their talent never diminished even after decades in the classroom. After 5 years of marriage, Gregory came along. He was our only child arriving after several heartbreaking miscarriages. Perhaps we spoiled him too much, compensating for the siblings he would never have. From an early age, Gregory showed signs of a difficult personality. Nothing was ever enough. New toys were exciting for a day before being discarded. Achievements were stepping stones to greater demands, rather than moments for gratitude. Richard and I worked hard to balance our careers with family life. We never had much extra, especially during those early years when student loans and a mortgage stretched our budget thin. I remember nights at the kitchen table with Richard going through bills and moving numbers around like puzzle pieces, trying to make everything fit. But we managed and even found small ways to celebrate and create beautiful memories, despite financial constraints. When Richard received a significant promotion in his 15th year at the firm, things became more comfortable. We could finally save for retirement and take modest family vacations. Gregory was a teenager by then, increasingly distant and focused on comparing our middle-class lifestyle unfavorably to his wealthier friends. The 1967 Mustang came into our lives on our 25th anniversary. Richard had secretly been restoring it for 2 years, working weekends and evenings in a friend's garage. When he drove it into our driveway, gleaming in deep blue paint that matched my favorite color, I thought my heart would burst with joy. It was extravagant by our standards, but Richard had saved carefully and done most of the work himself. "Every queen needs her chariot," he said, placing the keys in my hand. "And you, Lila, have been the queen of my heart since the day we met." That car became our weekend escape. We would drive along coastal roads with the windows down the wind, tangling my hair as Richard sang along to oldies on the radio. He had secretly modified the glove box, adding a hidden compartment that only opened when you pressed a certain spot under the dashboard. Every classic needs its secrets, he winked when showing me the trick. Just like a good marriage. We promised each other that after retirement, we would take a cross-country drive in that Mustang, seeing all the places we had been too busy working to visit, the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, the Rocky Mountains. Our someday plans that we never doubted would come true. As Gregory grew older, his self-centered tendencies became more pronounced. College was a series of changed majors and requests for additional money. After graduation, he launched several business ventures, each one requiring startup loans from us that were never repaid. 2 marriages ended quickly with no children. The tension between Richard and our son grew as Gregory approached 40 still, depending on occasional financial rescues. "We cannot keep enabling him," Richard would say, after particularly difficult phone calls about overdue rent or car payments. "He just needs more time to find his path." I would counter, playing the peacekeeper as always. Looking back, I wonder if my attempts to smooth things over only postponed the inevitable confrontation and prevented Gregory from facing necessary consequences. The diagnosis came during a routine physical. Richard had been feeling more tired than usual, but we attributed it to age and his demanding work schedule. When the doctor called us back for additional tests, a knot formed in my stomach that never fully untangled. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months, at most. The words fell like stones into the still pond of our life, creating ripples that would change everything. Richard, ever practical, received the news with a calm that I could not match. No chemotherapy, he decided after we met with specialists. "I want quality time, not lying sick in a hospital when the odds are so poor." I fought him at first, desperate for any solution, any treatment that might keep him with me longer. But eventually, I accepted his decision to focus on the time we had left rather than enduring painful treatments with little hope of success. Those final months were a strange blend of sorrow and beauty. Richard organized our financial affairs, updated his will, and made sure I understood the details of our insurance and retirement accounts. We spent evenings looking through old photo albums, reminiscing about our life together and the love we had built. Sometimes we laughed until tears came, and sometimes we simply held each other, no words necessary between souls so deeply intertwined. "I have few regrets," Richard told me one evening, as we sat on our back porch watching the sunset. "But I wish we hadn't waited to live some of our dreams. We always thought there would be more time." In his final weeks, Richard insisted on one last trip in the Mustang. Though he was too weak to drive, I took us to our favorite beach about 30 miles from home. He sat beside me, his hand occasionally brushing mine across the gearshift, his face turned toward the sunlight streaming through the window. We parked facing the ocean and spent hours just watching the waves, speaking little but communicating volumes in our silence. As I helped him back into the car for our return home, he suddenly gripped my arm with surprising strength. "Lila," he whispered, his voice urgent, "when I'm gone, check the glove box. Remember the trick I showed you? Important things there. For you." I nodded, not wanting to tire him with questions, assuming he meant the car's maintenance records or something similar. How I wish I had asked for clarification. Richard passed away peacefully at home 3 weeks later, his hand in mine as he took his final breath. Gregory had visited briefly twice during his father's illness, always with excuses about work commitments and uncomfortable around the medical equipment that had transformed our bedroom. He was not there at the end, when his father slipped away with my name on his lips and the most peaceful expression on his face. The grief was a physical weight pressing on my chest until I struggled to breathe. 45 years of shared jokes, morning kisses, and intertwined dreams suddenly ended, leaving me alone in rooms that echoed with Richard's absence. The sound of his keys no longer jingling by the door. the indent in his pillow slowly rising as days passed. The coffee mug I could not bring myself to move from where he had left it. The funeral was small but beautiful, with close friends, and Richard's colleagues sharing stories that captured his integrity, his quiet humor, and his extraordinary capacity for kindness. Gregory arrived 20 minutes late and left immediately after the service, citing a business meeting he could not reschedule. I was too numb to feel additional hurt from his behavior, my heart already shattered into pieces, too small to count. In the chaotic days that followed, I forgot Richard's whispered words about the glovebox. Grief does that to you, takes important information, and buries it under an avalanche of pain and practical concerns. There were thank you notes to write for funeral flowers, insurance forms to complete, and an emptiness in my days that threatened to swallow me whole. I returned to teaching after 2 weeks, needing the structure and purpose that my classroom provided. My students were wonderfully kind, having created cards and a memorial art piece that brought the first genuine smile to my face since Richard's passing. But evenings and weekends stretched before me like a desert I had to cross alone. Nights were the hardest. I would wake reaching for Richard's warmth beside me, only to find cold sheets and renewed grief. A widow's support group at my church helped somewhat, connecting me with others walking the same painful path. The leader, a gentlewoman named Donna, who had lost her husband 5 years earlier, assured me that the pain would not always be so raw, though it would never completely disappear. Grief is the price we pay for love, she told me, and a love as deep as yours and Richard's will naturally bring profound grief. But that same love will eventually help you heal. I began the slow process of sorting through Richard's belongings, donating his clothes to a veterans organization, and carefully preserving the special items that most strongly carried his essence: his favorite books, the wood carvings he made. During winter evenings, the collection of smooth stones he had gathered from beaches during our travels. But I could not bring myself to make any decisions about the Mustang. Some mornings I would sit in the driver's seat before school, inhaling the lingering scent of Richard's aftershave in the leather upholstery, and allow myself to imagine he was just inside the house about to join me for a weekend drive. About 3 weeks after the funeral, Gregory began calling more frequently and stopping by the house unannounced. His sudden attentiveness might have seemed like delayed grief finally emerging, but there was something calculating in his questions about life insurance, retirement accounts, and the house deed that made me uneasy. Still, I was grateful for any connection with my only child during such a painful time and tried to ignore my instinctive wariness. "Mom, have you thought about what you're going to do with all this space?" he asked during one visit, gesturing around the 3-bedroom home Richard and I had purchased 30 years ago. "It's a lot for one person to maintain. Probably expensive to heat, in winter too." "This is my home, Gregory," I replied simply. "All my memories with your father are here. I'm not ready to think about moving." He nodded too quickly. Of course. Just thinking practically the way Dad would have. Speaking of practical matters, have you met with the financial advisor? Yet I could come with you, help you understand the options. I explained that Richard had prepared me well for handling our finances and that everything was organized. Gregory seemed disappointed, but quickly shifted topics. A week later, he arrived with a woman he introduced as Stephanie, his new girlfriend I hadn't known existed until that moment. She was at least 15 years younger than Gregory, dressed expensively, and evaluating my home with poorly concealed disapproval. They brought takeout dinner and a bottle of wine, presenting the evening as a gesture of support. "You shouldn't be driving that old car," Mom Gregory commented as we ate. "It's got to be a gas guzzler, and those old models don't have modern safety features. Plus, maintaining it will get expensive. Dad may have been able to fix it himself, but you'll have to pay mechanics premium rates." "The Mustang runs perfectly," I countered. "Your father maintained it meticulously." "Still, wouldn't something smaller and more economical make sense? I know a guy who could give you a good price for it." I changed the subject, uncomfortable with his persistence. Later, while getting dessert plates from the kitchen, I returned to find Gregory at Richard's desk, a drawer partially open, and papers in his hand. He quickly replaced them when he saw me. "Just looking for a pen," he said smoothly, though there was a cup of pens clearly visible on the desk surface. The next morning, finding the courage that grief had temporarily diminished, I confronted him as Stephanie waited in the car. "Gregory, I found financial statements moved on the desk. Were you looking through our private papers?" His face flushed with anger, not embarrassment. "For God's sake, Mom, I'm trying to help you. Dad always kept you in the dark about money, and now you're vulnerable. There are people who prey on widows." "Your father never kept me in the dark," I said firmly. "We made decisions together. I appreciate your concern, but I need you to respect my privacy and my ability to manage my own affairs." "Fine," he snapped. "Make mistakes, struggle alone. That's what you and Dad always did, shutting me out of family decisions, making me feel like an outsider in my own family. Gregory, that's not fair or true. Isn't it Dad always put you first? The precious wife, the perfect marriage. I was just an afterthought." His voice had risen to nearly a shout. Stephanie called from the car, and Gregory stomped away, leaving me shaken by the bitterness in his words. They drove off without a goodbye, and I spent the day securing important documents in a locked file cabinet. 2 days later, I returned from school to find small things out of place. A jewelry box slightly askew on my dresser. Richard's desk drawer not fully closed. The key hook by the back door, empty of the spare house and car keys that always hung there. A quick inventory revealed several small pieces of jewelry missing, plus the keys and the Mustang's title and maintenance records that Richard kept in his desk. Before I could call Gregory, my phone rang with his number. I answered with my heart pounding. "Mom, I sold your car," he announced without preamble. "Got $8,000 for it, which is pretty good for such an old vehicle." The room seemed to tilt beneath me. "You? What, Gregory? That wasn't your car to sell?" "It's for your own good," he continued in a self-righteous tone that made my blood boil. "An old lady like you shouldn't be driving something that powerful anyway. You can take the bus to work now. There's a stop just 2 blocks from your house." "Gregory, that car was mine. You had no right." Panic rose in my throat as I suddenly remembered Richard's whispered instruction about the glovebox. Whatever important item he had left there was now gone. "I'll give you the money," he said dismissively. "Well, after I invested a bit to grow it for you. There's this amazing opportunity Stephanie told me about. I want the name and contact information of whoever bought the car I demanded, right now." "Don't be ridiculous, Mom. It's done. Be grateful I got such a good price. Listen, I have to go. We'll talk about this later when you're thinking more clearly." The line went dead. I called back repeatedly, but he had turned off his phone. I sat at the kitchen table shaking with a combination of grief, rage, and fear. What had Richard left in that secret compartment? What final message or gift from my beloved husband had Gregory unwittingly taken from me? I spent a sleepless night cycling through disbelief that my own son would betray me so completely, determination to recover whatever Richard had left, and deep sadness at the broken relationship with my only child. The next morning, I called in sick to school for the first time in years. After a night of tossing and turning, I had formulated a plan. I would find that car and whatever Richard had hidden inside it, no matter what it took. I made a list of every car dealership and used car lot within 50 miles, beginning with those closest to Gregory's apartment in the city. Armed with a photograph of the Mustang and a determination that surprised even me, I began my search. I described the deep blue 1967 Mustang in detail to bewildered salespeople across 6 different dealerships. Each conversation ended with disappointment, but I refused to give up. Richard had entrusted something important to me, and I would not fail him. At the 8th dealership, an older salesman named Frank paused when I mentioned the car. A 67 Mustang deep blue restored condition. I didn't buy one recently, but a customer was in here yesterday talking about one he just purchased privately. Said he got an incredible deal on it too. Name was Mason something. Holbrook, I think. My heart leaped. Do you know how I could contact this Mason Holbrook? Frank shook his head. Sorry, he was just browsing our newer models as a second vehicle. Wait, he did mention he runs that hardware store over on Maple Street. Holbrook Hardware, I believe. I thanked him profusely and drove straight to the directory assistance office, where I was able to get both the store number and, with a little persuasion, about a family emergency Mason's home phone. With trembling fingers, I dialed the number from my car. Hello, a deep voice answered. Mr. Holbrook, my name is Lila Winters. You don't know me, but I believe you recently purchased a 1967 blue Mustang from my son. My voice caught slightly. A car that wasn't his to sell. There was a pause on the line. Mrs. Winters, yes. I did buy a Mustang 3 days ago from a man named Gregory. He said it belonged to his father who had passed away. That car was mine. I explained my words, tumbling out faster than intended. My husband restored it for me years ago, and my son took it without permission while I was at work. There is something very important to me hidden inside that car, something my husband mentioned before he died last month. Another pause. Ma'am, I'm very sorry about your husband and this situation. The seller, Gregory, did seem in a hurry to complete the sale, which should have been a red flag. Would you like to come see the car? Perhaps we can figure this out together? We arranged to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. As I drove there, I rehearsed what to say, how to convince this stranger to let me search the car without sounding unstable. I arrived early, ordered tea with shaking hands, and watched the door nervously. Mason Holbrook was not what I expected. A tall man in his mid-50s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, he approached my table with a gentle smile. Mrs. Winters, I'm Mason. I'm very sorry about your situation. We spent the next hour talking. Mason was a classic car enthusiast who had been looking for a project vehicle when he saw Gregory's online listing. He had been suspicious of the low price, $8,000, for a car worth at least $35,000 in its condition, but Gregory had insisted on completing the sale immediately in cash with no receipt. He said he needed to settle his father's affairs quickly, Mason explained. Claimed the paperwork was all in order, just needed a signature transfer at the DMV. Said his mother was elderly and couldn't drive anymore. I felt both anger and embarrassment hearing how my son had described me. In 68, Mr. Holbrook and I teach high school art full-time. That car was my most treasured possession, not just because of its value, but because it was a labor of love from my husband. Mason nodded. I'd be happy to take you to see it. It's at my house about 15 minutes from here. We drove separately to Mason's suburban home, my heart pounding harder with each mile. When we pulled into his driveway and I saw the familiar blue body of the Mustang sitting there, tears sprang to my eyes. Mason pretended not to notice, giving me a moment to compose myself. "She really is beautiful," he said, patting the hood affectionately. "Your husband did incredible work. I was actually planning to continue some restoration this weekend, just some minor detailing to preserve the original character." With gentle courtesy, Mason opened the driver's door and stepped back. I slid into the familiar seat, running my hands over the steering wheel, where Richard's hands had so often rested. The familiar smell of old leather and the wood oil Richard always used brought fresh tears. Mason handed me a tissue without comment. "You mentioned something hidden in the car," he prompted gently after I had collected myself. I nodded. "The glove box. My husband said there was something important there, but I forgot until after Gregory had taken the car. I reached for the glove box latch, and the compartment opened to reveal only the original manual and some registration papers." Mason looked confused. "Is that what you're looking for?" "No," I said, remembering Richard's secretive smile years ago. "There's a hidden compartment." Richard was clever with modifications. I ran my fingers along the underside of the dashboard, feeling for the small bump Richard had shown me. There it was, a slight protrusion that gave way under firm pressure. A soft click, and a second, smaller compartment appeared behind the regular glove box. Mason's eyes widened. "Well, it'll be damned. In 30 years of working on classic cars, I've never seen something like that." Inside the secret space were 3 items: a bank book, a small velvet jewelry box, and a sealed envelope with my name written in Richard's familiar handwriting. My hands trembled so badly that Mason offered to hold the items while I steadied myself. "Would you like some privacy?" he asked, understanding the moment. "No," I whispered. "Please, stay. I might need a witness to whatever this island." The bank book showed a savings account in my name that I had known nothing about, with a balance of $250,000. The jewelry box contained Richard's mother's heirloom pieces, antique earrings, a pearl necklace, and a diamond brooch that I thought had been sold years ago when we faced financial difficulties, and the letter 20 pages of Richard's thoughts written during his final weeks. "Oh, Richard," I whispered, clutching the envelope to my chest. "You were planning ahead until the very end." With Mason's permission, I sat in the Mustang to read Richard's letter privately. The familiar scent of the car surrounded me like an embrace as I carefully opened the envelope. "My dearest Lila," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then I am gone. And you have remembered my hint about the glove box. First, and most importantly, know that loving you has been the greatest joy and privilege of my life. Every day with you was a gift, even the difficult ones." Richard's beautiful handwriting filled page after page with memories inside jokes and expressions of love, but he had also included practical information about the hidden account. "I started this savings account 10 years ago," he explained. "I diverted small amounts from each paycheck and my retirement distributions, building it slowly so you would have additional security. I kept it separate from our regular finances because, as much as it pains me to write this, I worried about Gregory trying to control your assets after I was gone. His financial requests have increased in recent years, and I've seen how he tries to manipulate you when he needs money." Richard went on to recommend a law firm specializing in estate matters, providing the contact information, and noting they already had copies of all important documents. He had thought of everything protecting me even beyond death. The final pages of the letter were deeply personal, encouraging me to use the money to live the life we had planned together. "Take that cross-country trip in the Mustang," he wrote. "Visit the art museums we dreamed of seeing. Perhaps set up the small studio you always wanted. Live boldly, my love. I'm always with you, in the brushstrokes of your paintings and the sunset colors you love so much. Until we meet again, all my love, Richard. By the time I finished reading, tears streamed down my face, but they were different from the tears of recent weeks. These felt cleansing, somehow connecting me to Richard's enduring love rather than only to my loss. I carefully folded the letter and returned to where Mason waited patiently on his porch. "Thank you for your kindness to a stranger," I said, my voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "I'd like to buy the car back from you," I continued. "At fair market value, of course, whatever you paid my son plus compensation for your time." Mason shook his head. "I can't take your money, Mrs. Winters, not after hearing your story." "Please," I insisted. "Richard would want things done properly, and I need to know this is settled legally and correctly." Mason considered for a moment. "How about this? I accept the price I paid, but only under one condition. You have to promise to stop by the hardware store occasionally and share stories about this beautiful car and the man who restored it. I'm always collecting tales of classic restorations." I agreed, surprisingly touched by his request. We exchanged phone numbers and arranged to complete the car transfer the following week. As I drove home, I felt Richard's presence more strongly than at any time since his death. He had known exactly what might happen and had prepared for it, leaving me not just financial security but the tools to stand on my own. The next day, I contacted the law firm Richard had mentioned in his letter. Jonathan Pierce, the attorney Richard had consulted, confirmed everything in the letter and helped me understand my legal position regarding Gregory's unauthorized sale of the car. "Technically, your son committed theft and fraud," Jonathan explained gently. "The car was titled in your name, not his. You could pursue criminal charges if you wish." "I don't want to send my son to jail," I said, after consideration, "but I do need him to understand there are consequences for his actions." With Jonathan's guidance, I developed a plan to confront Gregory from a position of strength rather than victimhood. I would take back control, not just of my property, but of our relationship, setting boundaries that should have been established years ago. That evening I called Gregory surprised when he actually answered. His voice was wary. "Mom, look, if you're calling about the car again." "I'm calling to request a meeting," I said, keeping my voice steady. "There are important matters we need to discuss in person. I'm pretty busy this week with work," he hedged. "This concerns additional inheritance matters," I said, not exactly lying, but allowing him to draw his own conclusions. "Things your father arranged before his death." That caught his interest. "I could meet tomorrow evening, I suppose, at your house." "No," I replied firmly. "The Riverside Cafe at 6. It's a public place with some privacy for conversation." I had chosen the location carefully on Jonathan's advice, ensuring we would be in a setting where Gregory could not easily make a scene. "Fine," he agreed, curiosity evident in his tone. "Tomorrow at 6. I spent the next day preparing mentally for the confrontation, rehearsing what I would say, and steeling myself against Gregory's likely manipulations. When I arrived at the cafe, I was calm and centered in a way I hadn't felt since before Richard's diagnosis. Gregory arrived 10 minutes late, dressed in an expensive suit that I suspected he could not afford. He sat across from me with an air of impatience, barely concealed beneath a veneer of concern. "You look well, Mom." He offered, studying me, as if trying to gauge my mental state. "Thank you. I am well." I ordered tea for myself and waited while Gregory requested an elaborate coffee drink. When the server left, I began the conversation I had rehearsed. "Gregory, I want to discuss the proceeds from the car you sold. You mentioned $8,000. I'd like to know your plans for that money you said you were investing." He shifted uncomfortably. It's in process. These things take time to set up properly. It's a complex investment opportunity. I see. And what exactly is this opportunity? It's technical, Mom. Investment terminology you wouldn't understand. He waved his hand dismissively. Trust me, it's going to grow significantly. I took a sip of my tea watching him over the rim. Actually, Gregory, I've found the car. And what's more, I found what was hidden inside it. The color drained from his face. What are you talking about? The Mustang. I tracked it down to a man named Mason Holbrook. Hess agreed to sell it back to me. I kept my voice even watching the shock register in his eyes. More importantly, I found what your father left for me in the secret compartment of the glovebox, the one you never knew about. Secret compartment, he repeated, clearly blindsided. Yes. Inside were your grandmother's jewelry that you thought your father had sold years ago, a bank book for an account containing $250,000 and a letter from your father, with very specific instructions about how to handle the estate and how to handle you. Gregory swallowed hard, his confidence visibly crumbling. Mom, I was just trying to protect you. That car wasn't safe for someone your age, and I was worried about unscrupulous mechanics taking advantage of you. Is that why you took the car while I was at work? Why you sold it for a quarter of its value in cash with no receipt? Why you kept the money? My voice remained calm but firm. He looked down at the table, shoulders slumping. I needed the money, he admitted quietly. I have some gambling debts. People are pressuring me. Stephanie will leave if I don't get things under control. So you stole from your grieving mother. It wasn't a question. I was going to replace it, he insisted, though we both knew it was a lie. Once I got back on my feet. Gregory, your father anticipated something like this might happen. That's why he created separate accounts and left such detailed instructions. He loved you, but he understood your weaknesses. So what now? He asked, defensive anger replacing his momentary remorse. You going to call the police? Have your only son arrested? No, I said after a pause, but things will be different between us from now on. I will not be your financial safety net anymore. Your father and I spent decades rescuing you from your poor choices, and it hasn't helped you grow into a responsible adult. You can't just cut me off, he protested. I can, and I am. Additionally, I expect the return of the jewelry you took from my bedroom dresser while getting the car keys. His eyes widened in surprise that I had noticed. I don't know what you're talking about. 3 pieces are missing. My mother's silver bracelet, the small diamond earrings your father gave me for our 20th anniversary, and the vintage brooch from Aunt Helen. I want them returned by the end of the week. Gregory stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Gone was the grieving widow he thought he could manipulate. In her place sat a woman reclaiming her power. I think you should get help for your gambling problem, I continued. I can provide information about support groups, but the financial assistance stops now. And if I get help? If I change? He asked, a hint of the little boy he once was peeking through his adult facade. Then, well, see. I will always be your mother, Gregory. That door isn't closed. But trust has been broken, and it will take time and consistent action, not promises, to rebuild it. We parted with an awkward, brief hug. As he walked away, his shoulders were slumped. But there was something almost like relief in his posture, as if a charade he had been maintaining had finally ended. I sat alone at the table, feeling both drained and strengthened by the confrontation, and certain that Richard would have been proud. The following week, I met with Mason to complete the paperwork for the Mustang. I insisted on paying him the fair market value of $35,000, not just the $8,000 he had paid Gregory. "This isn't just about the car," I explained when he protested. "It's about doing things properly the way Richard would have wanted, and about me taking control of my life again." Mason finally agreed, but offered to help complete the minor restoration work Richard had planned. "It's the least I can do," he said. "Besides, I own the hardware store for a reason. I love working with my hands and solving mechanical puzzles." Over the next few weekends, Mason taught me basic maintenance for the car, something Richard had started to show me before his illness. I discovered I enjoyed learning the inner workings of the machine that had meant so much to my husband. Mason turned out to be a patient teacher and introduced me to the local classic car club, where I was welcomed warmly, despite being one of few women members. With the security of the hidden account Richard had left me, I made a decision that had been forming since finding his letter. After 30 years of teaching, I would retire at the end of the semester. Art had always been my first love, and Richard's encouragement to set up the small studio you always wanted echoed in my mind. I converted our spare bedroom into a proper art studio, installing the northern-facing windows Richard and I had always talked about, but never found time to add. The renovation was therapeutic, giving me a project to focus on while honoring Richard's memory. Each decision I made, from the paint color to the storage solutions, felt like a conversation with him. My world began expanding in unexpected ways. I joined an advanced painting class at the Community Arts Center, something I had always been too busy to pursue while teaching. The instructor, Marion, was a talented artist in her 70s who pushed me to experiment with styles beyond my comfort zone. Through the class, I formed friendships with people who shared my passion for creativity rather than merely being colleagues or neighbors. When Marion mentioned a week-long art trip to Santa Fe she was organizing, I surprised myself by signing up immediately. The old Lila would have hesitated, worried about the cost or leaving home for so long. The new Lila, shaped by loss, but strengthened by it, packed her suitcase and her best brushes with enthusiasm. In Santa Fe, I reconnected with Thomas, a college friend who had been at my wedding, but whom I'd lost touch with over the decades. He had relocated to New Mexico after his own wife's, passing 5 years earlier, and had built a new life teaching pottery at a local arts center. We spent evenings catching up over dinner, our shared history, and parallel experiences of loss, creating an immediate comfort between us. Back home, energized by the trip and new connections, I began searching for a small commercial space to realize the dream Richard had encouraged. I found a storefront in a revitalizing area of town with affordable rent and charming architectural details. The space needed work, but I could envision it transformed into a welcoming studio where I could teach art classes, particularly to seniors who, like me, were looking for new creative outlets in their later years. The process of obtaining permits and preparing the space kept me busy through the fall. I painted the walls myself in warm, inviting colors and installed adjustable lighting that would be kind to aging eyes. Friends from the art class and car club pitched in, turning the renovation into weekend gatherings with potluck lunches and much laughter. A small local paper ran an article about my venture, Senior Artist Opens Studio, Finding New Purpose After Loss. The publicity brought inquiries from potential students, and I scheduled my first class for early December, 6 months after Richard's passing. The day before the studio opening, as I was arranging the last details, the bell over the door jingled. I turned to find Gregory standing there, looking thinner and less polished than when I'd last seen him. "Mom," he said hesitantly, "your neighbor told me I might find you here." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral, though my heart was racing. This is my new studio. I'm opening tomorrow. Gregory looked around, taking in the easels, the artwork on the walls, some Richard's, some mine, and the sense of purpose that filled the space. It's really nice, he said, sounding genuinely impressed. Dad would have loved this. Yes, I agreed. He would have. Gregory stepped forward, offering an awkward hug that I returned cautiously. I'm sorry, he whispered against my hair. For everything. The car, the lying, all of it. I pulled back to study his face, looking for the manipulation I'd grown accustomed to seeing. Instead, I found something new: humility, and what appeared to be sincere regret. I joined GA, he continued, Gamblers Anonymous. Been going for 2 months now. Got a sponsor and everything. That's good, I said carefully. I'm glad to hear that. Stephanie left, he added, with a rueful smile. Turns out, she was mainly interested in what I could buy her. I'm sorry to hear that I offered meaning it despite everything. Don't be. It's for the best. Part of facing consequences. He gestured to a nearby chair. Could we talk for a few minutes, if you're not too busy? We sat at the small table I'd set up for student consultations. Gregory told me about his journey over the past months, how hitting rock bottom when I confronted him had finally forced him to see the pattern of his life. He had taken a job at an accounting firm, starting at an entry-level position despite his age and education. I'm living within my means for the first time, he said. Tiny apartment, used car budget for everything. It's actually freeing. Your father would be proud of that, I said, feeling a glimmer of the maternal pride that had been overshadowed by disappointment for so long. I wasted so much time trying to beat him, Gregory said suddenly. Trying to prove I could be more successful, have more things. I was jealous of how you two loved each other, how complete you seemed without needing anything else. He shook his head. It sounds so stupid saying it out loud. Why didn't you ever talk to us about these feelings? I asked. Pride, stubbornness, feared he'd think less of me. Gregory sighed. Classic avoidance, my therapist would say. We talked for over an hour, more honestly than we had in decades. When my last student of the day arrived for a private lesson, Gregory stood to leave. Could I? Maybe help out here sometimes, he asked tentatively. I used to be good at woodworking in high school. Remember those frames I made for your classroom? I still have them, I admitted. They were beautifully done. Maybe I could teach that. Alongside your painting classes, if you'd want that. I considered his offer, weighing the risk of disappointment against the possibility of healing. We could try, I said finally. Perhaps start with helping on the weekends and see how it goes. The genuine smile that spread across his face reminded me of the boy he had once been before adult complications and resentments had hardened him. I'll be here Saturday morning, he promised. You can count on it. As he left, I found myself thinking that perhaps Richard's final gift wasn't just the financial security or even the letter, but the chain of events he had set in motion that might finally help heal the broken relationship with our son. 1 year after Richard's death, my art studio had become a thriving community space. What began with 4 hesitant students had grown to multiple classes each week, with waiting lists for the most popular sessions. The highlight of our calendar was the Senior Artists Exhibition I organized, displaying the work of students who, like me, had discovered or returned to creative expression later in life. The Mustang, fully restored to its original glory, became something of a mascot for the studio. I often parked it prominently outside, its distinctive blue paint drawing attention from passers-by. Several students admitted they had initially come in because the car made them curious about the person who owned it, then stayed for the welcoming atmosphere and creative encouragement they found inside. Gregory had kept his promise to help on weekends, and over months of consistent reliability had earned enough trust to begin teaching a woodworking class for teenagers. Working with younger students seemed to soften something in him, and I often overheard him encouraging a frustrated young person with surprising gentleness. "You need to be patient with yourself," he'd say. "Mistakes are just part of learning. Trust me, I've made more than my share." Our relationship remained a work in progress. There were awkward moments and old patterns that occasionally resurfaced, but we were learning to communicate more honestly. Gregory had repaid the money from selling the car and returned the jewelry as promised. More importantly, he had maintained his sobriety from gambling and continued attending support meetings even when a promotion at work created additional stress. One day at a time, he would remind me, using the language of recovery that had become part of his vocabulary. That's all any of us can do. In early spring, with Gregory's encouragement, I finally embarked on the cross-country trip Richard and I had planned for retirement. I mapped a route that would take me to all the national parks and museums we'd dreamed of visiting together. Though I made the journey alone, I never felt lonely. Richard's presence seemed especially strong as I drove the Mustang along coastal highways and through mountain passes, the engine purring as if pleased to be fulfilling its long-delayed purpose. I took photographs at each destination, not just tourist snapshots, but carefully composed images that would later inspire paintings. At night in motel rooms, I wrote in a journal recording not just what I had seen, but how it made me feel, and what Richard would have said about each place. The journal became a continuing conversation with him, a way to include him in experiences he had longed to share. My friendship with Thomas, the pottery teacher from Santa Fe, deepened through weekly phone calls during my travels. When my route took me near New Mexico again, he joined me for 3 days of exploring artistic communities in Taos. His company was easy and undemanding, based on mutual respect and shared interests, rather than neediness or obligation. The classic car club members had given me mechanical tips before my journey and eagerly awaited email updates from each stop. These men and women, most of whom I had not known a year earlier, had become an unexpected support system. They understood that the trip was about more than sightseeing. It was a pilgrimage to honor Richard's memory and a declaration of my ability to continue without him. During the months on the road, I discovered capabilities I hadn't known I possessed. I learned to change a tire when necessary, navigate unfamiliar cities without GPS when cell service failed, and strike up conversations with strangers that often led to recommendations for hidden local treasures not found in guidebooks. Each small victory built my confidence and expanded my sense of what's possible in this new chapter of life. I returned home with thousands of photographs, a notebook full of ideas for paintings, and a quiet certainty that Richard would have been proud of my journey. Both the literal road trip and the emotional distance I had traveled since his death. Grief still visited me, of course. There were still moments when a song on the radio or the scent of Richard's favorite coffee would bring tears. But those moments no longer felt like drowning. They were more like brief rain showers that passed, leaving the air clearer behind them. My relationship with Gregory continued to evolve. He had maintained the studio in my absence, even expanding the teenage woodworking program to include a scholarship for students from lower-income backgrounds. When I asked what had inspired that initiative, he shrugged self-consciously. "Just thinking about what Dad would have done," he said. "He was always helping people quietly without making a big deal about it." Yes, I agreed, touched by this evidence that Gregory had been paying attention to his father's character all along despite their conflicts. That was exactly his way. On the anniversary of Richard's death, I drove the Mustang to our favorite overlook parked facing the sunset, as we had done countless times together. I brought a sketch pad and captured the blazing colors in quick emotional strokes that would later become a painting for the studio. Sitting in the familiar driver's seat, I spoke aloud to Richard, as had become my custom during solitary drives. "You were right," I told him, watching gold and crimson paint the sky, about so many things. About the money, about Gregory needing to find his own way, about me being stronger than I knew. The engine ticked as it cooled a comfortable mechanical heartbeat beneath my words. "I miss you every day, but am not just surviving, Richard. I'm living, creating, connecting, finding joy again just as you wanted for me." The setting sun cast long shadows across the landscape, a visual reminder that endings create new perspectives, new ways of seeing familiar terrain. In that moment, I understood the profound lesson Richard had left me, that love doesn't end with loss. It transforms, becoming the foundation for whatever we build next. A year ago, when my son told me Ed had sold my car, I thought I had lost the last physical connection to my husband. Instead, that painful moment had set in motion a journey of discovery, both literal and figurative. The treasure in the glove box was valuable, yes, but the true gift was the path it opened toward reclaiming my strength, rediscovering my passion, and rebuilding family bonds I had thought broken beyond repair. As I drove home in the gathering twilight, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent since Richard's diagnosis. The road ahead remained uncertain. I was, after all, starting new ventures at 68, but uncertainty no longer frightened me. Richard had prepared me better than either of us had realized, not just with financial security, but with 45 years of love that had shaped me into someone capable of facing whatever came next. Has something in your life ever seemed like the end of your story, only to become the beginning of a new chapter? If you've experienced loss or betrayal, how did you find your way forward? Share your journey in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that even our darkest moments can lead to unexpected light. Thank you for traveling this road with me today, and remember, the greatest treasures are often hidden in the places we least expect to find them.